Hey guys, so I want to answer the questions around antibody testing for coronavirus. Antibody testing is very sexy. Unlike the search for the virus itself in your body, which includes a very nasty nasopharyngeal swab, and then a test that includes a reaction which is called PCR, which is definitely expensive and also takes time, antibody testing is actually much faster and cheaper. And it will be not surprising at all that it will become very ubiquitously available soon. However, this is not a reason for you to jump off your couch and go get tested right away. What are the main questions around antibody testing? First, if I have the antibody, does it mean I won't get infected again? We don't have an answer to this question because this virus is still too damn new. That being said, we are not blindfolded when it comes to coronaviruses, and we have met them before. The respective epidemics of SARS and MERS in 2002 and 2017-18 taught us a lot of lessons. And we know from the experience with those viruses that share a lot of genetic information with the current coronavirus that antibodies aimed against them on survivors of the disease protected people from reinfection for up to 2 years in the case of MERS and for up to 17 years at least in the case of SARS. So it's not a long shot to assume so far that antibodies against the current coronavirus will also render protection. The unanswered questions are, how long am I protected for? We don't know. And what level of antibody gives me immunity? We know again from the experience of the other coronaviruses that if you had a weak infection, which again not always correlates with how symptomatic you were, but you had a weak immune reaction to the virus and therefore had a weak antibody response, it might not give you as much protection as a strong immune reaction to the virus. This is why when we measure antibodies, we not only measure the presence or absence of the antibody, but we also measure levels. Over what level of antibody are you protected is an information that only time will give us, and that remains another unanswered question. The second question is, who should get tested for antibodies? With as limited as the information that they will give us is, there are still certain cases in which getting antibodies nowadays might make sense. For instance, if you need to go take care of somebody who's more vulnerable to the virus and you have kept yourself away from them because of the risk of exposing them. This is partially the reason of why antibody testing might be justified in healthcare workers. Now, there are caveats to this argument too. This early in the pandemic, many people who already have antibodies might still be under the throes of the virus infection and therefore able to give it to somebody else. This is where detecting the two subtypes of antibodies will be helpful. Generally, when we check antibodies to viruses, we check two subtypes of antibodies. IgM, which speaks of a recent infection. My mnemonic in medical school was M. I can still taste it. Whereas IgG speaks of a more distant infection, and also IgG provides long-term immunity. My mnemonic there was G as in gay, because God knows gay lasts forever. So if you do get tested, but you still have a strong IgM level of antibodies against coronavirus, then that's a recent infection. And with what we know so far, that even in asymptomatic individuals, carriage of the virus and the capacity to infect others can last up to 21 days. You have to be very careful with a test result that displays significant amount of IgM. So ideally, the theory would be that if you have a low IgM level and a high IgG level, you had a distant infection, you are covered, and you should be safe to go visit vulnerable people. However, all these premises are not perfect, and there are cases reported in literature from this year that people that had coronavirus never developed an IgM response and only had an IgG response. That being said, if the situation is dire and your loved ones need you, having a significant IgG with low or no IgM might be your safest bet at knowing that it's safe to go see them again. Antibody testing might actually be more helpful not to us as individuals, but to health authorities, as they try to gather more information about which areas of the population have been impacted recently by the virus, whereas which ones have been impacted more in the distant past. And that way to trail the presence of the virus in a more directed way, and hopefully for once incorporate targeted community action for true containment of the virus in the future peaks. Thanks.